If you're a fan of esports, you've probably watched some of the legendary plays like Evo Moment 37, where Daigo Umehara parries 15 consecutive hits with only 1 pixel of health left to clutch out the match, or Faker's mind-blowing Zed 1v1 against Ryu, and if you're anything like me, thought to yourself, there's no way I could ever be that good. These pros have a talent that I simply don't, and resign yourself to never being able to reach that level? Well, that's exactly what we're going to explore in this episode. Are the pros just naturals who are created genetically better than you for esports, or is there something else? Could you be that pro making insane plays, and what is the most important factor that you need to make it happen? Welcome to Esports Academy, a podcast and video series where I teach you how to become a pro. We'll be using current research from sports and performance psychology to optimize the road to success, allowing you to unlock your true potential and improve the fastest. It's pretty natural for us to watch people do things we never even thought were possible and think that they're just naturally talented, because we have pretty good reason to. You've seen it growing up in school where some kids just seem to get it and others struggle even after putting in monumental efforts. We accept that some kids are smart and some are just simply not. In fact, the best predictor of performance that psychology has ever found for pretty much everything is just that: intelligence. If you take a random person and give them a random task or put them in a random job, the best predictor of their performance and their success, outside of any previous experience doing that thing, is their level of general intelligence, or as more commonly referred to, IQ. Now, there's a lot of controversy around IQ research and its validity, so we have to be a little bit careful not to read into it too much, but it does little to influence the fact that study after study has shown that a higher IQ is correlated with better performance on almost every task. But how important are genetic factors like IQ for esports in particular? Well, when testing someone's intelligence through a metric like IQ, researchers are actually testing something more like their problem-solving ability, things like spatial intelligence, memory, and logic skills. Now, video games take a lot of quick thinking, like reacting fast and solving problems on the fly. Things like information processing, spatial awareness, and memory skills are absolutely necessary to have. So you would think then that a high IQ makes you good at video games. And you'd be absolutely correct. Research has shown that children with high IQs are just naturally better at games like chess than those with low IQs. However, herein lies the problem with IQ. Remember, IQ tests problem-solving abilities. Things like spatial intelligence, memory skills, and even things like language and logic skills are examined. These are all very general skills because IQ tries to get at somebody's general intelligence. However, how good is general at measuring the specific? How good of a predictor will a general intelligence test be for, say, someone who spends their entire life mastering one specific game? What if instead of looking at beginner school children, we were to look at the masters? Turns out researchers had the same question, and so they replicated some of the earlier studies on chess players done with children with elite players and experienced adults. What did they find? IQ was not super relevant. Really, we can view performance as a simple equation. Performance equals natural talent, so things like genetics, plus a general environmental category we will call preparedness. So things like how much did you study before a test, or even simple things like did you visualize your free throw before you took it. And research on this natural talent portion, especially that of IQ research, has shown us that at low levels of performance, such as beginners and children, natural talent is very important and a very large part of success. However, humans make the mistake of applying that same value of talent to high performance as well, which we have now found is simply incorrect. As performance psychology has progressed, the role of natural talent in high-level performance has almost vanished. Now, I'm not going to sit here and claim that genetics plays no role in your chances of success in becoming a pro. There has been plenty of research done on this question, and it is quite the debate. Much of the research contradicts other research, and there are so many factors at play that it is going to take a long time for sciences like psychology and genetics to figure it all out. There could very well be some genetic component that makes you an esports god that science just hasn't found yet. However, I'm willing to bet my left pinky that that simply isn't the case. And the reason for this is that science has already found something else to predict one's potential, something that's predictive power rivals even that of IQ at low levels of performance. Researchers interested in high performance and mastery had always wanted to find that one thing, that one holy grail most important thing for mastery. And while in the real world there is no holy grail, as everything is far more complicated and influenced by hundreds of other factors, they did find something as close as you can get to a holy grail. And when they found it, it was so simple that it was practically a smack in the face. Practice. Those who practice more are better. It's obvious, at a beginner level, a kid with 100 chess games will almost always win against one with 10. But at higher levels of performance, like elite chess players and other masters, we tend to minimize the role of practice in our judgments in favor of things like natural talent. But science shows otherwise. As research on elite chess players was done, it replicated that clear link from practice to performance even at the top level. And it did so with shocking consistency and predictive power. No matter the level, amount practiced is the best predictor of performance. In fact, one of the original studies done on violin players separated a university music class of violinists into groups based on their potential, or what the raters and teachers thought was how talented they seemed. Turns out, the groups created were simply only consistent with the amount they practiced, and not much else. The top performers, ones that teachers and raters thought would be stars, had practiced for an average of 10,000 hours each. The group of good ones and the group of just okay students, on the other hand, sat at an average of 8,000 hours and 4,000 hours respectively. As more studies were done, one thing came up over and over, clear as day. Practice is the greatest and pretty much only way to high performance. As our knowledge of the brain and neuroscience has progressed, these results make perfect sense. Really, what you're after when you're trying to master something is biological brain changes, creating connections and pathways around your area of interest, like your game of choice, for example. You getting better at something is a sign that your brain has built more and stronger pathways and connections around that activity. They allow you to do things without thinking about them, even allowing you to perform complex skills seemingly naturally. Take CSing, for example, a core skill of MOBAs where you have to attack a creep at the right moment to make sure that you get the kill and therefore gold. If you just started playing a MOBA, you have to pay a lot of attention to the creeps in order to score last hits. As you get more experienced, you may be able to get every one and achieve a perfect creep score if you really focus. But a pro has spent so much time CSing, their pathways are incredibly solidified and built up, allowing them to do things like get a perfect creep score without even paying attention to it. They could be strategizing with their team, setting up kills on the enemy, and looking around the map while naturally and flawlessly getting every last hit. And the only way that these brain pathways and connections get built is by doing the activity. If you score last hits over and over and over again for years in a row, your brain is going to strengthen and build up the pathways associated with that activity. Sure, someone theoretically could have a genetic advantage that helps them build these pathways faster, but they still need the experience of CSing, and a lot of it at that, to actually create them. So practice is not just important for learning a skill, it's surprisingly also the most important thing to mastering it. If practice is the most important way to mastery, how much of it do we actually need in order to become masters? Well, you may have heard that anybody can become a master of any skill if they put 10,000 hours of practice into it. The violin study that we covered earlier, plus a few other ones, is essentially where this came from. And sadly, this is classic folk or mainstream psychology, as it's not exactly completely true. Even in that violin study, many of these top performing will-be stars students didn't even have the 10,000 hours of practice. And many other studies in performance psychology have proven that there are other important factors to mastering something outside of practice. One factor of particular interest to us is age. Many activities and skills seem to be much harder to master if you did not get involved with them as a kid. Early acquisition of some skills, especially some complex skills, looks to play a big role in one's potential for mastering specific things. For esports, there simply isn't the research done, so nothing is for sure, but that research suggests that if you did not grow up using a computer, for example, you will likely have a very difficult time mastering a competitive video game. Take a first-person shooter, for example. They require immense precision, accuracy, and speed when it comes to mouse movements. If you're over the age of 20 and using a mouse for the first time, not only will it be much more difficult for you, you might actually not be able to reach a top level even with 10,000 hours of practice. The good news is though that for most of you and most people that pursue esports spent their childhood playing at least some video games, which seems to be more than enough. So while the 10,000 hour rule isn't perfect by any stretch of the word, the general point it tries to get across is still extremely valuable for us. That practice is king when it comes to mastery, and it has some key points that are important for us to keep in mind. First is simply that practice is the best, and really the only way to mastery. Other things like genetics or what age you start at might have influences, but even those with the optimal genetics and starting age will be nothing without practice. And some studies with chess players and other games have shown that even those without can make up for what they lack with some extra practice. Practice is, by far, the single most important thing when it comes to mastery. Second, mastery involves an incredible amount of time and commitment. If we say the average time that you need to spend is 10,000 hours to become a master, then if you were to spend 40 hours a week practicing your game of choice, treating it like a full-time job, it would take you 250 weeks or just under 5 years to master it. That's an insanely long time for something you are doing full-time. Some games with pro scenes haven't even been out for 5 years or hell, even 10,000 hours. Now, luckily for you, this podcast is exactly what you need in order to lower that amount of average time practiced, as I'll be teaching you how to practice in the most efficient way possible. But even if we were to half the time and bring it to 5,000 hours, it still doesn't change the fact that it's going to take a long time. It will be a difficult path and you will need a lot of dedication to make it happen. If research in performance psychology has taught us anything, it is that if you want to be a pro, you're going to have to practice a lot. Now you may be thinking to yourself, is it really that simple? What about the gods, the fakers? Everyone at that level has practiced a ton. What else is there? Well, there are two interesting places to look to answer this question, Faker himself and our IQ studies mentioned earlier. First, Faker himself, when interviewed about his success, has time and time again cited his hard work and practice over anything else. In fact, Faker in an interview was quoted saying, "I don't think I have much talent. I used to play a lot of games when I was young, so I think I got a lot of good skills from that." But we're not always the best at determining the factors of our own success, so what does science say? Going back to our IQ studies, some studies have found a peculiar result. When looking at elite performers of chess, the very best ones, on average, have a lower IQ than their competitors. How could this be? Well, no one is 100% sure, and there have been multiple stipulations, but here's the one that I think is best because it follows the very laws of physics that Sir Isaac Newton laid out some 300 years ago. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. IQ and other genetics have their equal and opposite. If we accept that around 10,000 hours are needed to become a master, that requires an incredible amount of perseverance, dedication, and resilience. If you have a high IQ, you might get a head start and pick things up faster, but chances are you probably haven't gotten the opportunity to practice the far more important skills around perseverance, dedication, and resilience nearly as much in your life. Think about in school. The kid with high IQ comes to a math class, sits down, absorbs everything the teacher says, understands it, and has completed her homework before the class ends. She didn't learn anything about how to work hard, let alone perseverance or resilience. The kid with a low IQ, on the other hand, constantly got stuck and had to ask questions, barely got through the first question in class, and had to spend an hour at home to finish his homework. You never realize it when you're a kid, but you are learning those important hard work skills, resilience, perseverance, dedication, even for something you don't really want to do. But you do it anyways, and by doing it, you practice it. Your brain makes those vital connections and it becomes a little bit easier the next time. So if you're someone with a high IQ, it's a nice side effect. You get to pick up the game faster and get a little bit of a head start. But the really important things that will influence your chances of being a pro are the things that, due to your high IQ, you probably don't have that much practice with. Everything in life has an equal and opposite. And having a high IQ means having less practice when faced with challenges and barriers, and those skills are far, far more important to becoming a pro. But now that you know this, you can flex your strengths and train your weaknesses. If you're someone with a high IQ, just know you will have to work extra hard to practice your resilience, and if you're someone with a low IQ, know that if you stick with it, you can catch everyone else and surpass them in no time. So Faker himself thinks that practice plays the biggest role, and science backs that up, showing that even incredible genetic advantages like IQ aren't as advantageous as they may originally seem. Is practice the most important factor to becoming a pro then? Well, no, not quite. That's a little bit too simple. As we discussed, 10,000 hours is the golden standard for mastery, and that is an insane investment. If you're truly planning to go pro, hit that 10,000 hour mark, I guarantee you will hit setbacks, motivational lulls, and have plenty of moments where you want to give up. You're going to have to develop skills like resilience and find motivation to dedicate yourself to practicing a ton to even have a chance of reaching that number and going pro. The most important factor then is not the practice itself, but something that's going to help you get there, help you build those key skills and achieve those thousands of hours of practice. And in my opinion, that's your relationship with your game. It sounds obvious. If you want to go pro in a game, you have to enjoy playing it, but its importance cannot be understated. Because it's not just about liking the game, it's about deriving enjoyment from practicing and improving at it, and about having a healthy relationship with it. If you can't spend more than a couple hours playing before you get bored and want to move on to something else, it's going to be very difficult to keep yourself dedicated and disciplined to reach those high thousands of hours practiced. But even if you do, remember it's about practice, and that's not the same thing as simply playing the game. You need a drive to be good, to be better than you currently are. If you don't get much enjoyment from, say, spending hours in the training room perfecting a new skill and only later pulling it off successfully in game, or poring over your replays and thinking about how you could improve, it's going to be hard to keep yourself motivated. If you don't enjoy the process, I hate to say it, but there's no way you're going to make it. You will burn out far before you reach those thousands of hours practiced. But simply enjoying it isn't enough. You need to have a good relationship with your game too. I find that a lot of players that have played a game for a long time have a difficult relationship with their game. For example, they wish that it had some changes to make it better that the devs are just not interested in. Many players get frustrated and stuck up on every little change made that they don't agree with and end up having a prevailing negative view of the game despite playing it constantly and often enjoying it. Having a good relationship with your game means accepting that the game isn't yours and it's not going to be perfect. By accepting your game's flaws, you can learn to work with them rather than getting stuck up on them. If you constantly tell yourself that the game sucks and you hate it, it really won't be long before that actually becomes true for you. Another important thing for maintaining a good relationship with your game is giving it space when you need to. If you want to go pro in a game that you used to play for fun, essentially you are turning a hobby into a profession, and so you risk turning it into something that takes your energy rather than something that gives you energy. We are going to be talking about rest more in this podcast as it has a very important role in learning, but for now, just make sure that you have something else that you can do to rejuvenate or re-energize yourself. This can be a different game or something completely unrelated to esports, like rock climbing. Whatever you do, make sure that you treat your game with respect, as if you want to enjoy it and spend lots of time with it, the last thing that you want to do is start hating it. Now, I've talked a lot about various factors that influence your potential to go pro, so let's sit back for a moment and recap. Your goal in becoming an esports pro is to reach the top level of performance in your game. Simply, we can view performance as equal to your natural talent plus your preparedness. Now, since you're aiming for the top, natural talent is insignificant, and by far the most important part of your preparedness is how much you practice. If you want to go pro, you have to practice a lot. And the most important factor to getting that practice in making it pro is enjoying your game, enjoying the process of learning it, and maintaining a good relationship with it. If you have that, all that's left is to practice, 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 and you will be on your path to pro in no time. Hey everyone, thank you so much for checking out the Esports Academy podcast. If you want to stay up to date, make sure you subscribe or follow or whatever you do on your platform of choice, and come join us in our Discord to help stay connected. You can find the link in the podcast description. The next episode will be the first of 2 episodes looking at how you can structure your practice sessions like a pro. We'll be going over how the pros approach their practice sessions using effective goal setting to accelerate their growth, and how you can mimic their strategies for your own success. So if you want to train like a pro, make sure you check that one out, and I will see you there.